All right, good morning, Labor, Health, Social Service Committee. Welcome to February 8th. Marilyn, if you'd call the roll to get going.
Representative Chadwick.
Here.
Representative Clouston.
Here.
Representative Hornow.
Used.
Yes, here somewhere. Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Penn. Excused. Representative Trujillo.
Here.
Representative Ward.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Chairman Swanitzer.
Here. In committee, you'll remember we were taking testimony on Senate File 10, the Licensed Professional Counselor Compact. I know Ms. Semino had to get some kids to school this morning, so she'll be back up. Other people here to testify on Senate File 10, Ms. Somerville. Welcome to Labor, Health, and Social Services.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Andy Somerville, Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Centers, here to testify in support of this bill. For the community mental health centers, quite simply, we have a mental health workforce shortage. It is gotten significantly worse over the last couple of years. We've had a number of people retire early out of the profession, and we're just not bringing in enough providers they're in-state grown right now. So for this bill, what this allows us to do is to recruit people into Wyoming easier and more quickly, so that it eliminates that barrier as long as that person is from a compact state, eliminates the time frame it takes to normally relicense somebody in Wyoming. We think that this is going to be a huge help. We certainly have a number of our community mental health centers that are on bordering areas of our state where we can potentially bring folks in and get our staff hopefully where it needs to be. The other point that I wanted to make this morning is, in addition to helping us bring providers in, one of the biggest challenges we face in terms of access to mental health care is having providers in all the areas across the state. So we don't necessarily have so much of a problem with our larger cities and towns, but in our more rural areas, and frankly, we're classified as frontier in a number of places. Keeping a mental health professional in a small town physically there is incredibly important, but it's also incredibly difficult sometimes for a provider to be able to build out a private practice in those areas. There's just simply not the economy of scale that needs to be there. This compact would give them a tool as well. And we think it would provide an economic incentive for those folks to stay in those small towns in Wyoming where we really, really need them. If they have the ability to practice in compact states via telehealth, they could practice to the state of the South or North or, any of the other states that are involved in the compact. That gives them the ability to build out a more sustainable, financially viable private practice. How that applies to community mental health centers is we contract with a lot of those folks that are in smaller areas to help provide especially crisis coverage, emergency overnight coverage, and to be able to make sure that somebody doesn't have to wait, 2 hours for somebody to get into a county that there's nobody at. So we think that piece is incredibly important. Our centers are unanimously behind this bill, and Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Questions from Ms. Somerville or WAMSAC? Not seeing you this morning, Andy. Thanks for being here.
Mr. Chairman.
Other people to testify on Senate File 10. Welcome. Any one of those three chairs you'd like.
Good morning.
And just make sure that green light's on the microphone. And then, yep, welcome.
Robert Lau. I'm here to support the mental health licensing compact bill. I'm a licensed therapist in Wyoming, as well as Arizona, Ohio, Nevada. I work at F.E. Warren Air Force Base. I'm an embedded therapist for the 790th Missile Maintenance Group. There are 7 of us on the base, and they are currently trying to obtain some more, but they're not available. I get asked occasionally to help other states, but I can't because I'm not licensed in Colorado, and I just don't want to have the expense of having one more license to deal with. As it is now, I'm responsible in the states. I am currently covering Nevada CYB, which is the Child and Youth at the Top Gun base, through Zoom. but I'm licensed in Nevada to do that. And I have to follow their licensing board's rules to do that. And they do check up on me, and they did an audit on me this year to make sure that I had the correct CEUs and was understanding their rules and regulations for Zoom etiquette. You know, the stories I can have, I tried one time with my last company to go to Florida because they needed help at NAS Key West at the Navy base, but the Florida would not do a reciprocal license for me, even though I was licensed in 4 other states. And all those states require FBI checks. And I also have top secret clearance with the government. And so it was very frustrating for me and my company that I couldn't go to Florida when I was needed to work strictly on a military base. So the compacts would be a really good thing for me and other people like me, so we could seamlessly work between states without any problems. And I'm in full support of this bill. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Go ahead, Ripon O'Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are all the states pretty much consistent with the requirements needed?
Yes.
You mentioned Florida.
I can speak for the ones I'm licensed for: Nevada, Wyoming, Arizona, and Ohio. My home state is Wyoming. Yes, all of them require an FBI background check. The one thing that I think this bill really would be a really good thing is that if you're in the compact, these states can check to see if you're a bad apple. Right now, that's kind of tough thing to do. You know, so that would be in my opinion, a great thing. So you can't have people sneak into the state and become a therapist when maybe they were a bad apple in Indiana or somewhere. But yeah, the CEUs, I think Wyoming's 45, but some of the other states are more. It's incumbent on the therapist. Like for the licensing I have for those states, I have to meet their rules. And so this year, Ohio audited me and pulled all my CEUs, made sure my FBI was current. And if it wasn't, my license was gone. So it's kind of a issue to keep track of all these states. But my state, like I said, I'm covering Nevada right now for CYB, which is Child, Youth, and Behavioral, for the Top Gun base at Fallon, Nevada. So I'm doing that through Zoom, but I am licensed in Nevada, so I'm allowed to do that.
Okay, other questions? Committee, Representative Trujillo.
How many states did you say you were licensed in?
Let's see,
Oh, sorry, through you, Chair.
Wyoming, Nevada, Arizona, Ohio, so 4.
Follow up.
Yeah, keep going.
Did you know Wyoming has a shortage in therapists?
Oh, yeah. This is
And-
my home state. I don't know how many male therapists there are, but I don't meet many. And I work for a company that's out of Virginia that I've been working with the military for 4 years now at different bases. I've been at F.E. Warren, Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, NAS, Fallon, which is the Top Gun base for the Navy. And I was here when I started doing the military work. I understand there's a need, and I get it contacted all the time by people around the state to try to tempt me to move. But there just isn't a lot. I mean, I personally don't know. I know one in Laramie, and that's it. Another male therapist. So it is a tough state for whatever reasons for people to come here and be licensed professional counselors. Like in Nevada, I'm considered a CPC, a certified professional counselor. They got little tags. In the military, I'm considered a military family life counselor. And there are 1,400 of them in the country.
Follow
Follow
up
up.
again. Yep.
Yes. So how much of your time do you think you dedicate to Wyoming residents?
All the
Mr. Lau.
airmen are, most of them
Okay.
are Wyoming residents. You know, some some live in Colorado, and I, at this moment, like if they ask, if I see them on base, that's fine. But if they're calling me or they want to do a Zoom from Colorado, right now I can't do it because I don't have a Colorado license and I don't want to take the chance of losing my license over cross-state border stuff.
Representative Claston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quick question on the continuing education that you brought up. So under the compact, if Wyoming is 30 hours for 2 years and Ohio is 50 years, but as long as you're licensed in Wyoming, it's my understanding that Ohio would have to accept the Wyoming compact. So it would be the 30 hours.
You have to,
Go ahead, Mr. Law.
you have to have the CUs that that state requires. So if Wyoming, if Ohio has six, one of them has a lot, and I don't remember which one, I think it's up to 65. I think Nevada. If I don't have those 65 within the 2-year period of the license, then I don't get a license, because they do audit you. And I've been audited several times by the other states. And that, you know, the boards take their job seriously. They want to make sure you're doing what you say you're doing. The CEUs are kind of hard to keep track of because most states require so many in ethics and then other things that they think are important. Depending on the state. But you have to, you know, obtain those CEUs, and then it's a cost that's on the therapist.
Okay, follow up.
Follow
Representative
up.
Claston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's my understanding when there's separate licenses, like if you're gonna be separately licensed Ohio versus Wyoming. But once we could become a compact, I think they all have to accept whatever your home state resident requirements
That's a
are.
good question. I
Okay.
don't know.
Mr. Law.
I would be calling
Go ahead.
each of my states if this goes through to find that question out, because last thing I want to do is do something so the board of that state would be upset with me. The Zoom thing, because of COVID, really changed the game. Because they couldn't get anybody to go to, for example, I had been at NAS Fallon for a year. And they couldn't get anybody to replace me. So they asked nicely if I would do the Zoom on top of my job here. So I was like doing double duty, but I do have a current good standing license for the state of Nevada. And the military, like I said, vetted me. Like I have top secret clearance. There aren't many therapists who have top secret clearance for the government.
Okay, Representative Hornock.
Thanks. So, Mr. Chairman, in the military, I know underneath the VA, they have kind of their own little standards. I guess you might be a civilian then working for the military, so you have to abide by state standards rather than under the military umbrella where you could go anywhere you want with military. Is that
I can't-
the way it works?
As it stands
Mr. Lau,
now-
if you just say Mr. Chairman and then.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you.
As it stands now, I can't really go anywhere I want unless I'm licensed in that state. Now the Zoom allows me to talk to people in Nevada at Fallon. But I have to follow that state's rules for their Zoom rules. And it's right now, it's just kids ages 12 to 17 that I'd be seeing that are active duty military personnel with kids. So I know that they're trying to get it. So if you have one license in any state, you could work on a military base only, not in the community. If I was to move to different bases, but right now that's not the case.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for being here.
Thank you.
Other people wishing to testify in Senate File 10. Mr. Lindholm, welcome to Labor, Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm and I represent Wyoming, Wyoming's chapter of Americans for Prosperity, which is a new organization in the state of Wyoming, but it has 35 other states already under its belt. It's a conservative, libertarian-esque bottom-up organization that's very much grassroots. And when it comes to this piece of legislation, I was actually confused when I saw the Senate roll call when this legislation went through. I didn't really understand why some folks were not supporting this legislation. And the reason why Americans for Prosperity supports this legislation is we really think that licensed professionals need reform in a big way. If we want more of these individuals in the state of Wyoming, which I do think we do overall, then we should make it easier for them to be here. And this legislation does check that box as far as allowing for more opportunity for folks to be able to move here and practice their trade in the state of Wyoming. That being the case, I would also beg the committee that this interim you look into licensure reform over all areas that you currently have jurisdiction on. Because a lot of those hours in the state of Wyoming, we often brag that we're small government and that we're business friendly. That's also not the case when it comes to a lot of licensed professionals. And I hope that my testimony is not the kiss of death on this legislation, because I have not had very good luck so far this session endorsing professional licensure reform. I got ran out of a room by some hairstylists a little while back. So don't go after the hairstylist, Mr. Chairman.
I learned that in 2011. Any questions, for Mr. Lindholm? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindholm, are you aware that this compact requires licensees to have earned a postgraduate degree, including coursework in social and cultural diversity?
Mr. Lindholm, are you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I am. And most of those requirements stem from a university background that's now being pushed in the professional licensure field. It is a stance of Americans for Prosperity that still allows for more access to the workforce than currently exists in the state of Wyoming.
Follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindholm, are you aware of the broad emergency powers that page 51 of the bill give the compact? It says, upon determination that an emergency exists, the commission may consider and adopt an emergency rule without prior notice, opportunity for comment or hearing, provided that the usual rulemaking procedures provided in the compact in this section apply. And it says, number one, to meet an imminent threat to public health, safety, or welfare. Are you aware of that provision?
Mr. Lindholm, are you?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for Americans for Prosperity, when it comes to the provisions of any compact, we look at it holistically as this is much better than what the federal government would have us do. And we enjoy the fact that states are actually communicating together and joining together in those types of activities. So even though it does give those emergency powers and it allows professional licensed individuals to be able to work on those things, it is still the state's individuals that are participating in that. And so that's why Americans for Prosperity would be in favor.
Okay, one more. Go ahead, Representative Ward.
One last question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindholm, can you comment on any ties this compact might have to the AMA or the APA?
Mr. Lindholm, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, to Representative Ward's question, I cannot.
Okay, further questions, Mr. Lindholm? Seeing none. Thank you, Tyler, for being here. And committee interim topics open on Friday, so we'll talk about that process, but I'm sure all the lobbyists in the room know. Other people are here to testify on Senate File 10. Senator Baldwin, are you here on 10? Are you done over in your committee already? Interesting. All right. Any other public comment? Ms. Semino, you were still, anything else to add from, I think we got it. We don't need you to come up unless you felt like there's something you needed to clarify. But be close. That's nice. I appreciate it. All right, committee, let me check online world real quick. We do have someone who wants to testify. Sorry, I was not on my A game. All right. On their way in, Miss Kelly, you have the floor. Ms. Buckingham, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Buckingham, and I am currently the chair of the Mental Health Professions Licensing Board. I serve on the board as the addiction therapist representative. However, I am licensed in Wyoming as a clinical social worker, as well as an addiction therapist. And I also currently hold 6 licenses total in 4 states. I'm here to say that from a licensing board perspective, we support the compact. We believe in the availability of portability for our practitioners. And that being Wyoming is a privileged to practice state, it reduces the barriers for license holders from other states to provide services to all of our clients in the state. And also, excuse me, allows us to address the workforce shortage that we are experiencing. On a personal note, I know there's been question about reciprocity and the process to go through reciprocity. And I believe the gentleman that spoke when I first got on, who was also licensed in 4 states, mentioned the difficulty it can be to manage your CEUs and your renewals every year. I did the math quickly, and when my licenses are up, it is almost $950 a year for me to renew all of my licenses. Now, I realize that I'm a social worker and I'm an addiction professional, but in the years to come, the social work compact is also supposed to be coming through, and there would be significant benefit for me so that I could continue to abide by my Wyoming rules and regulations for my original license, and then be able to serve clients outside of the state who choose to live elsewhere or who choose to go on vacation. That being said, I stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Buckingham? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you comment on the compact's ties to the AMA or the APA?
Ms. Buckingham.
Yes, Chairman, Representative, I cannot comment on that. I do know, however, that the committee that is being formed to promulgate the rules and the process to roll out the entire compact does not have any representatives from the APA or the AMA.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here, Ms. Buckingham.
Thank you.
Most excellent Wednesday. With that, we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on Senate File 10?
Move the bill.
Moved by Chadwick, seconded by O'Hearn. I guess I should ask if there's any amendments, committee? Representative Yin, you have an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the amendment with your name on it that is in the handout that we got in the last meeting.
Thank you, Representative Yin. Committee, just to explain, it goes on page 61, and this is actually from LSO. They just put my name on it. And they wanted to ensure that this didn't have any overlap with the professional psychologist compact. I'm going to bring up that email real fast. I don't know, Ms. Semino, are you aware of, did I have an amendment on this? Let me hand it to you. It just adds the Psychologist Practice Act and keeps it out of the Counselor Practice Act. So that's the amendment that LSO asked me to bring because they forgot a statutory reference. So I don't think it's controversial. When I looked at it, I kind of spaced it from 3 weeks ago when it was mentioned. But if you do have any thoughts, Ms. Semino, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment is fine. I would also note that the amendment is unneeded. As far as practice acts and how they are designed, they must go, each compact, each interstate professional compact has to go under that profession's practice act. So the counseling compact should fall underneath the Counseling Practice Act in statute, as well as you will hear later on this morning, the psychological compact should fall underneath the Psychologist Practice Act. So I appreciate the concern and the amendment. If they would like that to, if that makes heartburn go away, we have no issue with it. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe I answered that.
It was apparently drafted by the head of LSO himself. So
Well, then let's, Mr. Chairman, then I say, let's do it.
all right. Any other discussion on that amendment, committee? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That amendment's passed. Any other amendments or discussion on the bill? Question being called. Representative Hornock, you have discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, mic's yours.
One of the things I want to ask in our state statute, there is slow this morning. So there is provision for an exemption for clergy. 3338-103. I just want to make sure that that exemption will continue. A lot of times, you know, clergy and other people like that are kind of practicing in a different way. But I want to make sure that exemption is not in danger if we enact a compact like this.
I would just assume as an exemption, they wouldn't ever be licensed as a professional.
So,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, yeah, Mr. Chairman, that amendment explicitly makes the compact part of the things where it makes sure everything in that list of A is exempted. So clergy are exempted from the compact as well as exempted from the original Professional Counselors Act.
Okay, and students in a course of study and unpaid volunteer services for charities. There is a list there, so. All right, Representative Ward.
Yes, I'm going to be a no on this. As you can guess from some of my questions, I'm uncomfortable with the broad emergency powers with the requirement for the type of coursework, cultural diversity that's required in the compact. And I'm concerned that it will cement us into providing gender affirming counseling in the future. So I'm going to be a no.
Other discussion? Representative Hornock, more?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one more. I read through our statute and the reciprocity that we currently have in statute, in my opinion, is pretty broad. It's, you know, any individual holding a certificate in good standing to engage in the practice of these things under laws of another state, having certification requirements substantially similar to those required by this act may, upon approval of the board, be issued certification to practice in the state. I think right now, I mean, I don't know that this will actually solve a problem that we have when it's, to me, the reciprocity section in that law actually does seem pretty simple and straightforward, and there's very few requirements. You know, that's I just don't know that this will necessarily solve our issue that we're having with limited workers in this position when we have that broad of a reciprocity allowance.
Okay. With that committee, Marilyn, if you call the roll on Senate File 10.
Representative Chadwick,
Aye.
Representative Clouston,
Aye.
Representative Hornock,
No.
Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Penn gave an absentee vote of no. Representative Trujillo,
No.
Representative Ward,
No.
Representative Yin,
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye. With a 5-4 vote committee, it is an interim committee bill. Who haven't I asked to carry one yet? Representative Clouston or Chadwick? Either one of you, since you were aye votes. Either one of you want to carry this on the floor? It promises to be an adventure. Representative Clouston, you got it? Okay. All right, with that committee, we're going to move on quickly to Senate File 7 because Senator Baldwin is here. The definition, and because it's only a 4-word addition, I'm optimistic we can get through this quickly. Welcome, Senator Baldwin, for Senate File 7. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for taking the excessive time to hear this. It's a long bill. We could go word by word and it still wouldn't take us very long. This bill, Senate File 7, I'm Senator Fred Baldwin, for the record, from Senate District 14. You will be seeing a lot more of it this session and in the interim. If you're not already sick of me, you will be. This bill is in response to, I believe, 3 years ago. And a good chairman could correct me if I'm wrong, but we passed a bill. We were looking at the opioid epidemic. I've served on a couple of national task force addressing the opioid issue, the opioid overdose issue specifically. And part of that was introducing Narcan or naloxone, you see on the second page of your bill, the naloxone hydrochloride as more publicly available, more readily available. What it does is it counteracts the opioid. It's called an opioid antagonist. At the time, that was the only drug on the market. As it turns out, with most technology, things are changing. There's a new molecule being developed. The name is not on the bill. And purposely, it's not on the bill because we don't want to tighten it down so far that we're just doing specific drugs. What this bill intends to do is just, if you turn to page 2, right at the top there, the definition of opioid antagonist means any device or medication, device meaning the way it's introduced, be it a nasal spray, be it a subcutaneous shot. That's the device part of that, or medication. There's at least one new drug that comes out to the market this year exactly. And there's a couple other in the pipe right now that are going to be coming out that are also opioid antagonists, somewhat more effective in some instances than the Narcan actually was. Important drugs to have in our arsenal. And unless you're living under a rock, you know that the opioid epidemic, opioid overdose deaths in Wyoming are atrocious. We lead the nation in suicide. We're very close to the top in opioid deaths, overdose deaths. So it's a big deal. And it's not all illegal fentanyl. It's not all illegal drugs. A lot of times this is prescription drugs. Be that oxycodone, whatever the drug may be. It could be something simple. It could be your cough syrup coating. Regardless, these drugs counteract those narcotics, the opioids. They're a very effective, a very good drug to have, a good drug in our arsenal. So all this bill does is seek to broaden that definition so that we can be all inclusive of all the opioid antagonists. And as those who have been around, and I apologize for those of you who haven't been around a lot, when we get specific on bills, sometimes we get too specific and we define something, and then we find out that next year or the next year, we have to expand that. I purposely made this bill very broad so that all the opioid antagonists will now be included. So we won't be back here next year and the year after adding another drug and another drug because they all have the same effect, do the same thing. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Questions for Senator Baldwin? Seeing none, Senator, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. And you will notice the only change that we made in the House Committee is we changed the effective date, and that's why it's blue instead of white.
We like color. All right, anyone here to testify on this bill? Ms. Russell, come on down. Welcome to Labor Health. Floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. I'm here in my capacity as Executive Director of the Wyoming Republican Party. One of the concerns that came up, first of all, I want to commend Senator Baldwin for the forward thinking, looking out at the FDA and some of the things that are in the pipeline, like he talked about, include buprenorphine, a drug. And there are some others as well. Methyl naltrexone is another one that's in the works. Opioids are a concern for everyone, and that includes fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid. And so certainly we want every tool in the toolbox that is possible. However, when I was researching what's out there for opioid antagonists, I found a number of papers that included marijuana and marijuana derivatives as opioid antagonists. The trouble with marijuana is that depending on the drug under the class, the broad class of opioids, it can be either, marijuana can be either an agonist or an antagonist. An agonist is something that you use for drug maintenance. So for example, if you have a cancer patient who's in hospice and on morphine, or another one of those drugs, it helps them maintain their tolerance. So as opposed to an antagonist, which will block the receptors and prohibit, it helps you prohibit the drug use. So depending on which drug it is, marijuana can act either way. They're looking at the number of papers that were out there on this issue. It wouldn't surprise me to see, although I couldn't find it, that it is one of those things in the pipeline under the FDA. And so what I am concerned about is that if this is not excluded in this bill, it could potentially allow a pathway for an administrative approval for the use of marijuana in the drug treatment, because the bill actually says any device or substance or medication. When you look at the Board of Pharmacy rules, it does allow pharmacists to prescribe controlled substances. Marijuana is a Class 1 controlled substance. And so the path is clear there. Right now, first responders have access to training for the use of the primary drug that's used in opioid antagonism, which is an naltrexone. I think the common name is a Narcan. And so what I would ask is that you amend this bill to specifically exclude on page 2, line 3, any device or medication. The amendment would be with the exception of cannabis products, including derivatives, synthetics, or derivatives of synthetics, until these issues can be explored. Not that in part would not be part of the amendment, but that would specifically allow us to look at that particular drug, because we know that's an issue here too. And not get ourselves into a situation where we then later have to exclude it before, if we find out that we can't control how it's going to act with a particular drug. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Questions, Director Russell? Go ahead, Representative Yin.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Russell, can you just introduce yourself by name briefly for the
I'm
record?
so sorry. Kathy Russell, Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Thank you.
I apologize.
So the one, I mean, I guess the one question I would ask is, are you suggesting that the United States FDA could approve in some point in the future marijuana for an opiate related drug overdose?
Ms. Russell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, yes, there are a number of states who already have medical marijuana, and this would simply be an added use.
Mr. Chairman, yeah. So just to clarify, I'm not saying the state of Wyoming is planning on doing that, but you're suggesting that the United States, the federal government, FDA, will approve it at some point for opiate related drug overdose.
I believe so. Mr. Chairman, I believe so. Line 4 specifically references the United States Food and Drug Administration. That's why I included that, that it could be in the pipeline. And like I said, these are peer-reviewed and professional articles that are exploring the use of cannabis and cannabis derivatives and synthetic cannabis derivatives as an opioid antagonist and agonist.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Russell, could you forward to us the language of your proposed amendment? Or
Yes,
to me?
ma'am.
Thank you.
Page 2, line 3, following the addition of any device or medication, comma, with the exception of cannabis products, including derivatives, comma, synthetics, comma, or derivatives of synthetics, comma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure our staff got that. Yeah. I'm going to move that amendment when we get to it.
If you have it written down, Ms. Russell, I'm sure if you would just hand it to Ms. Jeffries, we'll get to it at the appropriate time. Other questions for Ms. Russell? Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Russell. Did you bring this up at all during the Senate side of this with this bill, or is this the first time that this concern's been brought forward?
This is the
Ms. Russell?
first time, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clauston, I did not. I happened to be in the hearing and it got me curious about what is an antagonist. And so I researched it. That triggered the research.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Other people here to testify in Senate File 7. Let me check the online world, not seeing any hands on Senate File 7. With that, committee will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on Senate File 7? Representative Ward, move. Were you going to move the bill, Representative Ward?
I was going to move the amendment.
Then we'll get to that. Representative O'Hearn is going to move the bill. Is there a second? Seconded by Chadwick. Representative Ward.
I move amendment 1 to this bill. The amendment that was suggested by Mrs. Russell, I move it.
And Ms. Jeffries, you have the language of that? Excellent. And maybe one more time for the committee's pleasure, if you wouldn't mind reading where that's going to be inserted.
Let's see. After any device or medication, comma, with the exception of any cannabis product or products. Products. With the exception of any cannabis products, including derivatives, synthetics or derivative of synthetics. And then that all fits in before the United States Food and Drug
Approved by,
Administration.
yep.
Okay.
Is there a second for that? Seconded by Hornock. Discussion on the amendment committee.
Question.
Representative Chadwick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would ask the good Senator Baldwin, is there, do you have any problem with this amendment? How do you view this amendment? Could you please expound on that for us?
Do you have thoughts, Senator Baldwin? Go ahead. And maybe let me know which House member is carrying this on the floor while you're answering that question.
Okay, well, we're assuming that it passes. Excuse me. I would say this to the amendment. Excuse me, committee. Certainly, I don't think it damages the bill to any great degree. I would say it's unnecessary. This bill specifically addresses opioid antagonist, and without getting too deep into biology, this is something that goes to that receptor where the opioid binds. And this is something that absolutely binds and blocks the opioid from even being in effect. And the good presenter was right. There are some anti-agonist effects or antagonist effects of marijuana or the cannabis products, but they're not absolute. It doesn't block the receptor. It still allows that opioid to come through to some degree. So that's the differentiation in the bill. This bill is aimed at those things for drug overdoses. While marijuana may have some effect for drug overuse or drug abuse, for the drug overdose, it has no effect. So I would say it's an unnecessary amendment. I'm not going to stand here and say, oh, don't do it, it's horrible. But I would say it's an unnecessary amendment, and I don't think it's necessary to put in the bill.
Okay.
If that answered the question.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
While we have you, I guess we'll have Representative Klausner. Is it a question or? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we add this other amendment, just so everybody understands the process of how this bill will go through its process of becoming a law, can you, so if we add this other amendment, how does it change the process for this bill?
Senator Baldwin, just because the bill is now in control of the House, you don't need to answer that, but we'll do what we want to do with the bill. And then if there are any amendments, the other body can consider adopting those or disagreeing, and we could have a conference committee would be the answer. It's a great thing when you send the bill to our body that we get to control it. But am I floor managing this? I guess is my question. Or did you have somebody already picked out?
I do not have anyone. I would suggest somebody, a new representative. This is a good bill to do. It's pretty straightforward. It's simple, but that would be up to you. I know the chairman's name is on there as a co-sponsor, but we can talk with whoever. But I would suggest this is maybe one that a new committee member, a new representative may want floor manage because it's pretty straightforward.
I believe the original bill was from your predecessor, Representative O'Hearn, who brought this to the body 4 years ago, Mr. Laux, just so you know. All right, committee, more discussion on that amendment. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed say no.
No.
I think that amendment has failed. Any other discussion or amendments on the bill? Seeing none, Marilyn, if you'd call the roll on Senate File 7.
Hey, here you go. Representative Chadwick. Representative Klauston.
Aye.
Representative Hornock.
No.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Penn voted aye with an absentee vote. Representative Trujillo,
Aye.
Representative Ward,
No.
Representative Yin,
Aye.
Chairman Swanitzer. The bill passes with 7 ayes, 2 noes.
We'll find it a floor manager.
Thank you, committee.
And as I said, even though you got it without a single no vote in the Senate, life's tougher in the House, but we'll get it through for you. All right, have a great day, Senator Baldwin.
Would you like?
Thank you, Ms. Russell, for being here. Committee, next up is Senate File 26, the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact. The joke yesterday was we're going to rename our committee Labor, Health, Social Services and Compacts. Senator Pappas, are you here to present Senate File 26? It's an interim bill. And as I think everyone's aware, nobody up here was on the interim committee. So we struggle a little bit when it comes to. But the good news is it doesn't seem like the bill's changed at all, interim committee. So with that, let's talk another compact. Officially, Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you. Again, this was not my original bill, like the OT compact was, but I did support it. Certainly, I'm just here in support. Hollis here can carry the water. But I can certainly answer questions on compacts.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Dr. Hollis Hackman. I'm a psychologist from Sheridan, Wyoming. And I represent the Wyoming Psychological Association. And we're very much as a group in support of Senate File 26. As you can see, it's a 76-page bill. And as Senator Pappas mentioned the other day, compact is an agreement among states. And the language in these compacts has to be agreed upon by all the states that are involved. And hence, I think that's part of why you get such an extensive bill. There are 14 different articles in this bill, and I have them outlined, and I could go through them if the committee would like me to. But what I thought I would do is kind of contrast this compact to the one that you heard earlier and just provide some highlights in regard to how the psychology compact is different. And so, Mr. Chairman, if you please, I just might follow that pathway.
I think that's okay unless any committee member really wants to go through the basics. I guess they could bring up those specific sections at the appropriate time, but if you want to give a broad overview on necessity, that'd be great.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. So, Mr. Chairman, this psychology compact has been around longer than the LPC compact. Presently, there are 35 states that are on board with this compact. 33 are effective presently. There are 8 states with pending legislation, including Wyoming. The rules and the bylaws, et cetera, were enacted back in 2019. Now, that's not to say that rules can't be changed. In fact, if we adopt this compact, our board gets to appoint a commissioner, then we have a seat at the table. And so any rules that are developed with us at the table, we get a vote and we get to participate in that process. So, and we do have some information about the first full year of this compact, which covers the period from the 1st of July of 2021 to the 30th of June 2022. And what we know from psychologists that were renewing their what's called electronic passport to engage in this compact, what we know is that there were 3,400 psychologists that were eligible for that passport. And of those folks, 67% of them actually practiced under the compact umbrella. 45% of them saw 11 or more patients. And importantly, Mr. Chairman, 26% of those services were provided in rural areas. And as you heard Ms. Semino speak earlier on the LPC compact, we're an underserved area. We have 120 licensed psychologists in the state. We have more than that hold licenses, but most of those folks are from out of state. And of that 120 psychologists, we don't have coverage in all of our counties. So there is a shortage. We struggle to keep up with the demand. I can just share that here locally, there's a practice out by the airport where 5 psychologists are employed, and their next available appointment is sometime in May. We have other providers who have full books, and it's difficult for us to get our services out to people that are in need. And so we very much, again, support this compact. We think it reduces regulatory barriers and increases access to care. And that's a win-win for the citizens of our state. And I think those are the highlights that I have, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, questions, Committee Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you aware of any ties this compact has to the AMA or the APA? How are they involved?
Sure, Mr. Heck. Dr. Heck, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, the AMA has nothing to do with this compact. But I might ask for a clarification. Do you mean the American Psychiatric Association when you say APA? And Representative Ward, Mr. Chairman, the American Psychiatric Association has nothing to do with this compact.
Is there an American Psychological Association that's also an APA, or is that something different?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there in our common parlance, and there would be disagreement depending on who you talk to, but there's a little APA because they use a lowercase for their website and their letterhead. And then there's a big APA, and that's the American Psychological. So they use uppercase for their website.
Representative Ward, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you comment on the broad emergency powers that are given in this compact?
Dr. Hackman, if you could.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, I looked at those emergency rules last night, and I'm trying to get them up. They're in place for life and death sorts of situations, or situations where in terms of a provider who is acting badly, and there may need to be a suspension of licensure. I mean, I think those are all tied into those emergency sorts of allowances in the compact.
Okay, one more, Representative Ward.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to read the language quick so we're clear on what it covers. It says on page 57, upon determination that an emergency exists, the commission may consider and adopt an emergency rule, and so on. Number 1, to meet an imminent threat to public health, safety, or welfare. Number 2, prevent a loss of commission or compact state funds. So my concern is with the imminent threat to public health, safety, or welfare. How would that have played out in the scamdemic known as COVID?
Dr. Hackman, if you'd like to offer your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, I'm not sure I have a good, intelligent response to your question.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Might I, Representative Ward, as I mentioned over the last compact, it's only in relation to the practice of psychology and not anything else. It would have nothing to do with COVID or any other emergency. Okay, it's only the practice of psychology and only for the practice under the compact. Again, no rules and regulations can affect anything but the practice under the compact. And so if you think it's reaching outside the compact, that's not the case. You're misunderstanding the compact. Only the rules and regulations of the compact only are governed for those practitioners, only there for those practitioners that are practicing under the compact, which also have to practice under the rules and laws of the particular state that they go into. So it's pretty narrow.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it says that they may consider and adopt an emergency rule without prior notice, opportunity for comment or hearing, So they're not even going to ask for public comment before adopting an emergency rule. And that's my concern. Maybe you can speak to that.
And
Mr.
maybe
Chairman,
within 90 days after that, Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, all emergency rules are that way. That's inherent in the word emergency. We have many of those in the state of Wyoming already. Emergency rules are adopted because there is an emergency. You don't take public testimony and comment immediately. That comes. But an emergency rule is an emergency rule. And again, it has nothing to do with anything outside of the compact and the practice governing these practitioners that are practicing under the compact.
Representative Young.
Mr. Chairman, maybe giving a concrete example might help to understand the breadth or the narrowness of what the compact can do. So let's say the commission wants to enact an emergency rule. What is the maximum they could do, right? So would it just be preventing people from working between compact states? Is that the maximum they could do with an emergency rule?
Dr. Hackman or Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, that could be, or it could allow, say there's some kind of an emergency and they need some practitioners ASAP. They may loosen the requirement for continuing ed just for that emergency period. And so that, there may be some practitioners out there that, they don't quite have their hours yet, so they can't practice under the compact. But maybe under an emergency, they would need that. And that would allow a few more practitioners to come in. Now, I don't think that the rules, emergency rules would allow someone who is not passed the exam and not had his clinical time and not, is not licensed in another state. I mean, obviously that won't happen. But, I for all I know, the emergency rules have never, ever been used in any of the compacts. I don't know. I could find out from NCIC. They probably have that information.
Representative Young.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to make sure, the compact commission would never be able to stop a psychologist from working within their home licensed state. That's up to the state licensing board, right?
Chairman, absolutely not. Yes. And the practitioners in the state don't have to practice under the compact at all.
Okay, any more questions? Not seeing you right now. Thank you much. Other public comment on Senate File 26. Mr. Lindholm. I always want to call you Mr. Majority Whip. But welcome back to Labor Health, Mr. Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm and I represent the Wyoming chapter of Americans for Prosperity, which is a grassroots organization, bottom-up organization. I'm not here to testify in favor of this legislation. Interestingly enough, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, when you compare compact legislation, the ideology behind it is good, which is to mean that we can get more people in the state of Wyoming holding jobs and practicing their trades. What this legislation actually does is it attempts to do that. And it also creates new licenses to be able to do that. Instead of recognizing the licenses from other states and just having a quick checkbox to be able to confirm that, maybe a couple bolt-on rules so we can keep the feds out of the game. This actually creates a new interjurisdictional license. And then it also requires an e-passport to be able to temporarily provide those services. It is a good thing to have this telemedicine, and I think everybody appreciates that. But it is kind of interesting, Mr. Chairman. I think we were both around when these compacts really started becoming more popular, and it is a good idea for states to be able to coordinate. We first saw it with nurses and nurse practitioners and those types of things. But I think the psychologists started their association and they got pretty smart to this, because oftentimes what we see is professional licensed individuals creating these barriers for competition. And I say that as a professionally licensed individual myself, although very different from this. I'm a high voltage electrician. So, but well, yeah, many things, many hats, Mr. Chairman, and a rancher. But what we end up seeing in this situation is an association creating new barriers to be able to cross that state line instead of breaking down barriers. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, Americans for Prosperity actually opposes this legislation. I think there's some simple things that can be done to fix this legislation. That being said, I don't think you'd be compliant with the compact at that point anymore. So that is kind of a tough situation for you. I don't envy your position. I just figured I would mention that as I read through the legislation last night.
Questions for Mr. Lindholm? Representative Clouston.
Chair, thank you for the testimony. Can you show us in the bill where you're referring to that this would put up some new barriers?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. Mr. Chairman, specifically starting on page 14 is when we get into it. Page 14 on E, line 10, and then you go through 1 through 5 are the compliance portions. And it really doesn't get too tough until you get into page 15 on line 13, where it states a home state's license grants temporary authorization to practice to a psychologist in a distant state only if the compact state does these things. And specifically line 17 and 18 currently requires the psychologist to hold an active interjurisdictional practice certificate, which of course you can only get it from the association that is providing for the compact. And Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, that's creating more licensure and more barriers to work and empowerment in the state of Wyoming.
Other questions for Mr. Lindholm? Representative Chadwick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me be sure I'm understanding this correctly. So this page 15, line 17 and 18 currently requires the psychologist to hold an active interjurisdictional practice certificate. So would that apply to just the practitioner going out of state or also practicing within the state? So in other words, it would affect the compact specifically and not the current licensure.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lindholm.
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding, is that this would not affect current psychologists in the state of Wyoming practicing only in the state of Wyoming. If they were to enter into this compact because they wanted to be able to find more economic empowerment in that situation and entering this compact, they would have to now achieve this other license and then achieve a e-passport that would give them temporary availability. But for the psychologists that are only practicing in the state of Wyoming, their life would not change if they didn't want to enter this compact.
Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Chairman. So I just want to be clear on this because this could be a deciding point. So as you become a member of the compact, does this practice certificate just come with that? So as I'm a member of the compact, I get this. If I'm not a member of the compact, I don't get this, but that's my choice not to be a member of the compact.
But yeah. Mr. Lindholm.
Mr. Chairman, to Representative Clouston's question, that's my understanding. It is a strictly opt-in type of situation. And it's initially a good idea to have all of this as opt-in. I mean, it's a voluntary society. But that's when we kind of get into the rub. You're trying to do, as a legislative body, a good thing to be able to help out these professionally licensed individuals in your state and provide these options. And it seems at the same time, the association that is doing this interjurisdictional is also trying to put up walls. And so that's why I wanted to bring that to your attention, because unlike the last piece of legislation that just said, be a licensed professional, check the box in this state, boom. This comes with quite a bit more hanging on the tree. And that's where it becomes complicated.
And Representative Clouston, I believe the way to get that interjurisdictional is on pages 16 and 17, and that gives you the requirements to get that, primarily graduate degree in psychology accredited, et cetera. Representative Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Lindholm, would it be fair to characterize this as an opt-in with conditions?
In your thoughts, Mr. Lindholm?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Chadwick, yes, I think that's fair to state.
Other questions? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned And on page 69, it does talk about the e-passport. Do you know what that means? Thank you.
If you do, Mr. Lindholm.
Mr. Chairman, I'm quickly scrolling on my my mobile device here, but e-passport is defined on page 8. And this would be on lines 9 through 14. E-passport means a certificate issued by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. Once again, Mr. Chairman, the organization that's running the compact, that promotes standardization in the criteria of interjurisdictional telepsychology practice and facilitates the process for licensed psychologists to provide telepsychology services across state lines. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Hornock, that is the primary concern of Americans for Prosperity. We're about economic empowerment, allowing these opportunities to be able to practice with as few barriers of government as possible. And this does create more barriers, particularly the e-passport and the interjurisdictional license.
Further questions, Mr. Lindholm? Seeing none right now, Tyler. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other public comment? You guys already came up once. Make sure. I never do get you up here, do I, Ms. Love? Well, no. All right, welcome back. One more bite of the apple.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, I just have to respond to Mr. Lindholm's comments about barriers to practice. And frankly, that's a misrepresentation. It's not correct. Again, yes, there's a requirement in this particular compact to have the e-passport and to have that other documentation, but that's not a barrier. Right now, there is the ultimate barrier. There is no compact. You can't do anything. And since everything is opt-in, it doesn't hurt to require these things because the psychologists think they're important. But frankly, there's no barrier. It's not government creating a barrier. It's an opt-in. These psychologists choose of their own volition to get the e-passport and to get the interjurisdictional, whatever the name of that license is. It's their decision to do that. Okay, it's not government telling them they have to do that. And as far as that organization running this compact, that's not true either. Okay, the commission will run this compact. Okay, the association does support the compact, as does every association. The Nurses Association did, the Occupational Therapists Association did, the Counseling Association, all the associations are behind them, and they are because all practitioners want this. You know, you vote no against this, you're voting no against the practitioners. They do want this. And you're voting no against the care of our people in Wyoming.
So, I mean, Senator Pappas, we can hear from practitioners. They're coming up. And I like to think our committee is smart enough to make
I mean,
mind. So I appreciate your testimony.
What I'm trying to say is the association is not running this. They are in support. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Hollis, if he's got any, or to
Mr. Chairman, I just might add that our current law, our current Practice Act allows for temporary in-person provision of services across state lines. So this compact has no impact on our current state license law. That is something that remains in place regardless, and our, as well as our board, remains autonomous and is not burdened by any changes that are in this compact. So I just wanted to emphasize that there are two pieces to this compact. One's telepsychology and one's temporary in-person provision of services. But that second piece is already in our state law. This really has no impact on that. And again, this is an opt-in option for our providers. This isn't something that anybody's required to do. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I just appreciate the opportunity to add an additional comment.
How about hang out for me? We're going to listen to a couple of doctors. Dr. Cole, if you want to go first online. Welcome to Labor, Health and Social Services. Floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman, representatives of the committee. Thank you My name is Dr. Sadie Cole. I'm a clinical psychologist licensed and practicing here in Wyoming. I'm in Jackson. I'm a Wyoming native. I also have a license to practice psychology in the state of Massachusetts, where I received my PhD. I'd like to comment this morning less on the specifics of the legislation and more on the potential positives for the citizens of Wyoming by sharing the way that SIPAC could impact our practice. One of the effects that we've seen over the last few years has been that individuals that are receiving care from psychologists in the state of Wyoming might relocate to another area, or they might suddenly have to leave school and return home. There are a number of different cases in which things like that have happened. We'd like to emphasize that, as Dr. Hackman pointed out, this really only affects psychologists who choose to participate in the compact. The state itself participates in the compact, but the psychologist has the choice to engage in practice over state lines or not. If they want an interjurisdictional license, they can have it. A way in which this would impact, I think, us as psychologists is that it increases access to care for our patients that live in rural areas. Those areas may not always be within the state. And I've run into this, other psychologists with whom I work have run into this problem as well, in which the closest psychologist may actually be in Wyoming when you live in Idaho. But not being licensed in Idaho, I'm not able to see clients if they're physically in the state of Idaho. Idaho is not currently part of the interjurisdictional compact, but that's an example of the type of relocation that I'm talking about. Clients who move to another state, even though they geographically may be closer to a provider who's already caring for them, would have to change providers if that person is not licensed in the state to which they move. I'd like to emphasize as well that this really increases the continuity of care. That is, the individual can continue seeing a provider with whom they already have an established relationship over the course of their life. You know, if you have someone like I do, many of my clients are adolescents. If you have a student who then goes to college and they happen to be leaving the state, you currently cannot continue to see them if they move somewhere that you don't carry a license. With the interjurisdictional compact, with the SIPAC legislation, we would be able to continue to provide care to our Wyoming residents, even if they leave the state. And I think that's an important point, given the motility of a lot of our youth who leave to become educated. At the same time, it allows individuals to build their practices. Yes, as Mr. Lindholm pointed out, I think that the economics of this are obviously part of the process, but they're not by any means the most important piece. For us, it's really about patient care. It's about increasing access to care and improving continuity of care for the clients we currently serve. I'm fortunate in that I was already conducting remote telepsychology services prior to the pandemic. I was practicing in Massachusetts and licensed there before I moved back to Wyoming. And I maintained my licensure and continue to practice remotely, specifically to continue to offer care to clients with whom I had an established relationship so they wouldn't have to find a new provider. And I've done that the whole time I've been working in the state of Wyoming, carrying licenses here and in the state of Massachusetts, and working on licensure in a couple of other states as well. SIPAC, fortunately, would allow people like myself to continue serving clients that they have worked with, in some cases for many years. Those are important relationships. I'm sure that many of you have healthcare providers with whom you have great relationships. This would just allow us to continue that process and continue providing good care. There's also the issue of specialty care, which is often not available except via remote telepsychology services in the state of Wyoming and other rural intermittent areas. So I believe that access to specialty of care is also important. The closest person to you may not actually be a specialist. They also may not be residing in the state where you need the service. Because we are consistently a state with very high suicide rates, I would highly encourage you to support SF26 in order to improve our quality of patient care for psychologists in the state of Wyoming. I'll stand for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. Cole? Not seeing any doctor. Thank you for joining us from Teton County today. Have a great Wednesday.
Thank you.
Dr. Kilwine, welcome. Floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what Dr. Cole has shared. I echo a lot of her sentiments. But my name is Dr. Kilwine, and I'm a board certified clinical psychologist practicing out of Laramie, Wyoming. I do practice statewide and maintain licensure in North Dakota, Colorado, and California as well. So I similarly want to encourage you to vote yes on the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, better known as PsyPact, and I'll explain some reasons why. I currently serve as the Wyoming Psychological Association's representative of council, meaning that I represent the interests of Wyoming psychologists at legislative meetings of APA, the American Psychological Association, in DC twice a year. I was also recently elected to serve on APA's Committee of Rural Health, which lands me in DC on an additional occasion each year. From these experiences, I can assure you that PsyPact is widely accepted at the national level, and this is particularly true for rural states like Wyoming. So to answer a question that was presented previously, yes, this is supported by the American Psychological Association. We've heard thrown out the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, which is a product of APA. It's part of APA, and that is the board or the organization overseeing and coordinating PsyPact. This is a joint effort. When we are talking about the certificate and the e-passport, that's the same thing. It's not a license. So essentially what this means is that you become part of the compact and you're granted that e-passport, that certificate that just indicates you're a member of PsyPact. The only things our providers have to do in Wyoming, if they do choose to become a member of PsyPact, is essentially 4 requirements. 1, you must be licensed in a PsyPact state. So that could include a place like Wyoming. You can have no disciplinary action on any active license or license that you've had in the US. You have to have a doctoral degree granted by an accredited program, and you have to pass the EPPP, which is our licensure exam. These are the same requirements to practice in every state, including the state of Wyoming. So it's not that you have to go get additional training or certification. It doesn't pose additional barriers to our providers. The only requirement is that you submit these 4 pieces that you've completed and you're granted that certificate. The piece thrown out about culture and additional training there, that's not a PsyPact requirement. All psychologists are required through the APA to receive education and training in culture and individual difference from any doctoral degree granting program. So again, that's not a PsyPact requirement. That's something that's required for all doctoral granting organizations to have some training in that area. When we look at our state specifically, some of opposition is things like, our state board would have to handle complaints filed through PsyPact. We haven't seen any evidence of that there's any widespread increase of complaints filed with local boards. There's also no evidence that PsyPact would result in taking jobs from local psychologists. We already have a significant provider shortage, and this is particularly true in Laramie, where I practice out of. This includes plenty of Wyoming licensed psychologists who are already residing in and practicing out of other states to meet local demands. So when we look at who might become a member of PsyPact, a lot of what I'm seeing, the folks that ultimately become licensed in Wyoming and are practicing from other states, are graduates from our degree program here at University of Wyoming. So we have a clinical psychology program here. Those folks come, they do their training here for 5 years, and then they go off to internship, they go off to residency, and they often don't come back to the state of Wyoming. However, many of those folks, myself included, had great experiences in Wyoming. They want to serve the state of Wyoming, and so they get that additional licensure to be able to see clients here. PsyPact would allow those folks residing in other states that are part of the PsyPact to do that more streamlined. They wouldn't have to get additional licensure requirements. They wouldn't have to pay thousands of dollars per year to do that. So those are the type of folks we'd be looking at, people that might want to practice here. On that note, I'm happy to answer any questions. I echo Sadie's comments about particularly relevant for our rural residents, particularly relevant for our students in this state who might go home during breaks. They might go home during the summer, our seasonal workers. So any questions that you might have, I will do my best to answer.
Questions for Dr. Kilwine. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, do you provide gender affirming care?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead. Okay. Any other questions? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that in Wyoming, and I was looking that up in the statute, that there's 4 requirements that you've got to submit in order to get a license. Is that fairly standard across other states?
Dr. Kilwine, if you know.
Yeah, Representative Hornak, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so most states have similar requirements. I would say the requirements that sometimes differ across states, which was alluded to previously, is our CEUs. So how many continuing education credits you might need in different states. Wyoming, in my experience, has the lowest requirement. It's because we already have a shortage here. So that might differ, but yes, every license to practice as a psychologist does require that you obtain that license, no disciplinary action, you have a doctoral degree, and you pass the EPPP. One other thing that can differ is some states require an additional year to 2 years of postdoctoral training where you get additional experience after your internship before you can become licensed. Wyoming is one of the states that does not require that. So our path to licensure is actually a little bit quicker. Same reasons, because of our licensure shorter, because we receive a lot of training up to that point anyways. So I would say most other states that folks want to become part of the SIPAC probably have more training, more requirements than our Wyoming licensed providers do.
Okay, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned your license in a couple other states. Are any of those within the SIPAC deal? And are you a member of SIPAC currently? Thank you.
That's a great question. Yes, Colorado for sure is. How SIPAC works is your home state, the address, the primary address you practice out of, that state has to be part of SIPAC. So even though I do practice out of these other states, Colorado included, I cannot become a member of SIPAC because I'm practicing and located in Laramie. So that's why I have my Colorado license. I work at the university. I work with a lot of young people in this area. They're often living in Colorado or going back to Colorado during breaks, summer, things like that. So I can continue seeing them. That's only because I have gone out of my way to get a license there. SIPAC would allow our providers in the state to see those folks that might go back for temporary periods of time, might go off to college for a few years and come back. But SIPAC, it is what state your primary address that you practice out of, that state has to become a member of SIPAC in order to become a member.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you much, Dr. Kilwine.
Yeah.
Anyone else here to testify on Senate File 26? Mr. Laycock. Welcome to Labor, Health, and Social Services. I'm certain we'll be seeing you a lot this year. Ms. Lindholm, have a great day. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Chairman, Labor Health Committee. I'm Tom Laycock, Associate State Director at AARP Wyoming. AARP Wyoming is very supportive of this bill. The two doctors that you talked to previously talked about rural residents as well as students. You may not know there's actually a pretty good connection between older adults in this particular bill. Specifically, AARP statistics tell us at least 1 in 5 older adults has a mental health condition. Among Medicare beneficiaries 65 and older, the most common conditions are depression, anxiety, dementia, other neurocognitive impairments. Suicide statistics in Wyoming rise sharply after age 70, and nationwide, men age 85 and over have the highest suicide rates of anyone in the country. We believe SIPAC has the potential to improve the lives of Wyomingites by improving access to mental health care, by allowing mental health care providers an easier process for licensure. However, the compacts maintain the right of our state's existing mental health licensure board and legislature to determine who is available to practice here in the state. The compacts also open access to mental health and substance use counseling through telehealth delivery models. And for our members, telehealth means choice and independence from issues such as weather, transportation, or lack of available providers in their own community. We also know that the nation's older Americans have actually taken to telehealth visits more than you might think. According to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, after Medicare previously only reimbursed when a visit originated from another physician office. That provision was known as originating site restrictions. When the originating site restrictions were lifted after 2020, over 10.1 million telehealth visits were delivered nationally to Medicare beneficiaries each week from mid-March through July of 2020. Before the public health emergency, just 14,000 of these visits were happening each week. So in closing, AARP supports the bill as it opens access to mental health care for older adults, especially through telehealth. And for those reasons, we ask your support on the bill and thank you for your time in considering it today.
Questions for AARP? Seeing none. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else on Senate File 26? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on Senate File 26. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Chadwick, seconded by O'Hearn. Any amendments? I'm guessing likely not. Any discussion on Senate File 26? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as one of the testifiers correctly said, the American Psychological Association, the APA, is heavily involved in pushing this compact because it allows them to expand their influence. The APA pushes things on their website such as the following books: Sex Ed for the Stroller Set, How to Have Honest Conversations with Young Children. Others, including Trans Plus, Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You. Jacob's School Play, starring He, She, and They. Because of the broad emergency powers listed in the compact and also its connection to the American Psychological Association, I will be voting no.
Okay, other comments? Representative Hornock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a little bit different than the last licensure bill that we looked at. And these are people, it seems to me like we're not really going to solve the problems if somebody has the level of education that it takes to attain this type of license in one state. It seems like the reciprocity kind of spreads fairly easily to other states. Yeah, there's a fee involved in things, but there will be with the compact as well. So anyway, I think we're just adding a layer onto what layers that we currently have. I don't know that we're necessarily going to solve too much with this thing.
Representative Clauston.
Thank you. You know, Wyoming already has 40 compacts, right? And I can tell you as a provider, one of the benefits of a compact is I don't have to try to keep 5 or 10 licenses and, you know, make sure I meet all my deadlines and keep up with all the different requirements, right? So this is a lot easier on the provider. And I think just for that reason, you're going to have a lot more providers participate. And it will give better access to our patients, right? Because there'll be more providers that are willing to, as part of the compact, to practice in Wyoming. So that's really the benefit of a compact is it's easier on the provider, which means we get more providers involved in the system. So.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, Marilyn, if you call the roll on Senate File 26.
Representative Chadwick.
Aye.
Representative Clauston.
Aye.
Representative Hornock.
No.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Penn voted no by absentee ballot. Representative Trujillo.
No.
Representative Ward.
No.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Swanitzer.
Aye. Committee Senate File 26 is a committee sponsored bill. I suppose I will take it unless Representative Yin is excited about doing so, but
I think it would be better if you took it.
I will cover Senate File 26 on the floor. With that committee, it's only 9:30 and we've gotten through all of our bills with 30 minutes to spare. I'm not sure where Representative Penn is. She didn't come back. Not that that's the reason why we're running ahead, but it was nice to run ahead today by 30 minutes. So
Let's keep it up.
we'll look to see what the speaker sends to our committee here and hopefully have some bills ready for Friday. Have a good day.